Cleveland isn't chasing a coach anymore. They're being judged. Quietly, ruthlessly, and by someone who doesn't need them nearly as much as they need him. Because while the rest of the league is scrambling, making calls, leaking interest, and selling visions, John Harbaugh is sitting back, watching who blinks first. And somehow, the Cleveland Browns have put themselves right in the middle of that conversation. Just weeks ago, this felt impossible. Cleveland was stuck in the same cycle it's lived in for years. Another firing, another reset, another promise that this time would be different. But then something shifted. Ownership stopped hedging. The front office stopped waiting. And suddenly, the Browns weren't acting like a franchise afraid to make noise. They were acting like one ready to throw its weight around. And people around the league noticed. Because you don't casually enter a conversation with John Harbaugh. Not unless you're prepared to be evaluated just as hard as you're evaluating him. This isn't a coach looking for a soft landing or a quick paycheck. This is someone with leverage. Someone with a resume that speaks before he ever opens his mouth. And right now, reports suggest Cleveland didn't just reach out, they stepped forward with intent. What makes this even more interesting is the timing. The Browns didn't move early. They moved decisively. And that matters. Around the league, there's a growing belief that Harbaugh is watching which teams act with urgency and which ones hesitate, which organizations are serious about change, and which are just trying to win a press conference. Cleveland's name popping up in serious discussions wasn't accidental. It was a signal. But here, where this story takes a turn most people aren't talking about yet, this isn't just about wins. It's not even just about Harbaugh. It's about what Cleveland is trying to become next and who they're quietly preparing to build around. Because behind all the coaching rumors, there's a bigger picture forming. One that revolves around stability, structure, and a young quarterback who can't afford another chaotic situation. That's where Shedeur Sanders enters the conversation. Not loudly, not officially, but meaningfully. League chatter suggests Cleveland isn't just looking for a coach who can survive the job. They're looking for one who can shape a future. And that future depends on getting this hire right. No more half measures, no more divided authority, no more mixed messages. The stakes couldn't be higher. Harbaugh isn't desperate. He doesn't need to convince anyone. If anything, teams are trying to convince him. And that flips the usual power dynamic completely. Because when a coach holds all the cards, every weakness in an organization gets exposed fast. Especially in a place like Cleveland, where promises have been made before and broken just as quickly. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want to stay locked in on all the latest NFL drama, make sure you hit that like button. It helps the video reach more people who love this content just like you. And if you're new here, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss another update, reaction, or storyline as it unfolds in real time. I also want to hear from you in the comments. What do you think about Shedeur Sanders' performance and the Browns' collapse? Drop your thoughts below and let's talk about it. And don't forget to share this video with friends who follow the NFL. Your support truly keeps the channel moving forward. So the real question is whether the Browns want John Harbaugh. That part is obvious now. The real question is whether they're ready to give him what he'll demand. And whether they understand that this decision could define not just the next season, but the next decade. Because what happens next doesn't just change Cleveland's coaching staff. It changes the direction of the franchise, and possibly the future of a quarterback counting on someone to finally get it right. The shift in Cleveland didn't come with a press conference or a dramatic announcement. It happened quietly, but the message was loud. When the Browns decided to move on from Kevin Stefanski, it wasn't just another coaching change. It was an admission that patience had run out. Around the league, people read it the same way. Cleveland wasn't interested in maintaining the status quo anymore. They were ready to force change. For years, the Browns have been accused of hesitating at the worst moments, waiting too long, playing it safe, trying to thread the needle instead of taking control. That reputation didn't disappear overnight, but this move challenged it. Firing Stefanski signaled something different. It suggested urgency, and urgency is something top-tier coaches pay attention to, especially coaches who don't need to jump at the first offer that comes their way. Ownership played a big role in that perception. Jimmy Haslam has always been known as someone willing to spend, but not always someone willing to fully commit to a vision. This time feels different. Reports coming out of league circles suggest Haslam isn't afraid of a bidding war if it means landing the right leader. That alone changes how Cleveland is viewed. When ownership stops flinching, the entire organization feels it. And this wasn't a passive move. Cleveland didn't wait to see who else would enter the market. They didn't sit back and monitor the situation. They reached out. They made it clear they were interested. In a league where timing matters almost as much as money, that matters. Coaches like Harbaugh notice which teams hesitate and which ones move with intent. Cleveland chose intent. What makes this shift even more striking is how it contrasts with the Browns' recent past. This franchise has often been reactive instead of proactive. Decisions were made after pressure built, not before. But this time, the pressure came from within. That's a subtle but important difference. It suggests the Browns finally understand that waiting for the perfect moment usually means missing it. There's also a sense that Cleveland knows it's at a crossroads. Another half-hearted reset wouldn't just fail. It would confirm everything critics have said about the organization. That's why this moment feels heavier. The Browns aren't just replacing a coach. They're trying to redefine how they operate, and that starts with showing they're serious about leadership, not just results. Around the league, that seriousness is being noticed. Insiders have started mentioning Cleveland in the same breath as more stable franchises. Not because they've suddenly fixed everything, but because they're acting like a team that understands what's at stake. That's new. And for a coach like John Harbaugh, who values clarity and conviction, that kind of shift matters. But acting serious is only the first step. Making the right offer, backing it up with real authority, and following through is where teams usually stumble. Cleveland has taken a step forward. The question now is whether they're ready for what comes next, because urgency opens the door, but what happens after determines whether it stays open. John Harbaugh didn't become the center of this conversation by accident. The moment word spread that he was available, the league reacted fast. Phones started ringing. Agents got busy. Front offices shifted their timelines overnight. That kind of response only happens for a very small group of coaches, and Harbaugh sits firmly in that category. His name alone changes the temperature of an off-season. What separates Harbaugh from most candidates is that there's no mystery about who he is or how he operates. Teams aren't gambling on upside or hopping for growth. They know exactly what they're getting. Structure, accountability, a locker room that listens. Over the years, his teams have carried a clear identity, and that identity didn't change with trends or noise. In a league obsessed with the next big thing, Harbaugh represents something rare: reliability without stagnation. That's why he instantly became the top name on the board. Not because he's flashy, but because he's proven. Coaches like him don't just manage games, they set standards. Players know where they stand. Assistants know their roles. And front offices understand that decisions will be challenged if they don't align with winning. That level of clarity is attractive, especially to franchises tired of guessing. Another reason Harbaugh commands so much attention is timing. He's not coming off a long layoff or a failed experiment. He's stepping into this moment with his reputation intact. That gives him leverage. He isn't desperate to prove he still belongs. The league already knows he does. And when someone holds that kind of leverage, the conversation shifts. Interviews stop being auditions and start becoming evaluations. Cleveland understands this better than most. The Browns don't need another coach who's learning on the job. They don't need another reset disguised as a rebuild. They need someone who can walk into the building and immediately establish authority. Harbaugh fits that description perfectly. He doesn't need time to figure out how to lead. He's done it for years. But this goes beyond wins and losses. Harbaugh brings credibility, and credibility changes how a franchise is viewed both inside and out. Players respond differently. Agents listen more closely. Even opponents prepare differently. That kind of respect can't be manufactured. It has to be earned over time, and Harbaugh has already done that work. What makes him the center of everything, though, is choice. He doesn't have to rush. He doesn't have to take the first offer. He gets to decide what environment suits him best. And that puts pressure on teams to be honest about who they are and what they're willing to become. For Cleveland, that's both an opportunity and a test. Because landing Harbaugh wouldn't just fill a vacancy. It would signal a shift in philosophy. It would tell the league that the Browns are done experimenting and ready to lead with conviction. And when a coach carries that much weight, everything starts to orbit around his decision. What makes this situation different from every other coaching search Cleveland has been part of is the quiet presence of a future plan. This isn't just about fixing what went wrong last season. It's about getting ahead of what comes next, and at the center of that future, whether the Browns say it out loud yet or not, is Shedeur Sanders. His name keeps coming up in league circles for a reason. Shedeur isn't just another young quarterback prospect. He's viewed as someone who will arrive with expectations already attached. Confidence, spotlight, pressure. And that combination can either be sharpened by the right environment or completely ruined by the wrong one. Cleveland knows this better than most. They've watched talented quarterbacks come and go, not because they lacked ability, but because the situation around them never stabilized. That's why the coaching hire matters more than the draft pick itself. A quarterback like Shedeur doesn't need chaos disguised as freedom. He needs structure. He needs clarity. And he needs a coach who can set boundaries without killing confidence. That's where John Harbaugh fits almost too perfectly. His track record shows he understands how to balance accountability with belief, especially with young players trying to find their footing. Around the league, there's a growing sense that Cleveland doesn't want to just drop Shedeur into a broken system and hope for the best. They want to build the system first. That's a major shift in thinking. Instead of asking a quarterback to save the franchise, they're asking a coach to create conditions where a quarterback can actually grow. That's not how the Browns have always operated. The connection between Harbaugh and Shedeur isn't official. It's not confirmed, but it's being talked about. And that alone is telling. Teams don't casually align a coach's profile with a quarterback's future unless they see a real fit. Harbaugh's emphasis on discipline, preparation, and trust aligns with what Shedeur will need when the pressure hits, and the pressure will hit early. There's also the leadership element. Shedeur has shown he's comfortable commanding attention. That can be a strength or a problem depending on who's in charge. A weaker coach might try to suppress that. Harbaugh wouldn't. He'd channel it. He's dealt with strong personalities before. He understands that confidence isn't something to eliminate, it's something to direct. This is why this decision feels bigger than just filling a vacancy. Cleveland isn't just choosing a coach. They're choosing the tone of the next era. And if Shedeur is part of that era, then the margin for error shrinks. One bad hire could derail years of planning. One strong hire could finally give the Browns a quarterback and a culture that grow together. That's the real weight behind the Shedeur factor. It's not hype. It's preparation. Cleveland knows the next quarterback can't walk into uncertainty again, and that's why John Harbaugh's name keeps circling back into the conversation. There's one part of this story that never gets the spotlight, but it's the part that could decide everything. Power. Not talent. Not money. Power. Because no matter how strong the vision sounds on the surface, it means nothing if the structure behind it is fractured. And in Cleveland, that question hasn't gone away. Andrew Berry is still there, and that matters. He holds influence. He's been part of the decision-making process long enough to shape how this organization operates. For some coaches, that wouldn't be an issue. For John Harbaugh, it absolutely is. He's not stepping into another situation where authority is unclear or divided, not at this stage of his career. This is where Cleveland's past starts creeping into the conversation. The Browns have a long history of blurred lines, coaches without full control, front offices making moves that don't align with what's happening on the field, messages that don't match actions. That kind of environment doesn't just create tension, it kills progress, and coaches around the league know it. Harbaugh knows it too. That's why reports suggest he's asking hard questions before he even agrees to sit down. Who makes the final call? Who controls the roster? Who gets the last word when disagreements happen? These aren't details. They're deal breakers. A coach with his resume isn't interested in navigating internal politics every Sunday. The uncomfortable truth is that Cleveland has to choose a side. You can't sell a vision of stability while maintaining a power structure that invites conflict. If the front office holds onto control while expecting Harbaugh to fix everything, the partnership won't last. That's not speculation. That's history repeating itself. What makes this even more complicated is the timing. The Browns are at a moment where compromise could feel safer than commitment. Giving full authority to a coach is a risk, but not giving it might be a bigger one, especially if the alternative is continuing the cycle of partial trust and short-lived leadership. Around the league, people are watching how Cleveland handles this. Not just Harbaugh, other coaches too. Because this decision sends a message about whether the Browns are truly evolving or just rebranding the same structure with a different face. And that message travels fast. This power struggle also ties directly back to the quarterback plan. A young quarterback can't thrive in a divided organization. Mixed voices lead to mixed messages. Development suffers. Confidence drops. That's why Harbaugh's demands aren't about control for control's sake. They're about eliminating friction before it starts. Cleveland has reached a crossroads they can't dance around anymore. Either they commit fully to a leader and align the entire organization behind him, or they continue to operate in gray areas that undermine progress. Harbaugh won't enter that gray area. He's made that clear through his approach. And that's why this part of the story matters more than any rumor or headline. Because behind closed doors, this isn't a debate. It's a test. One that will reveal whether Cleveland is ready to change how it actually works, or if it's destined to repeat the same mistakes under a new name. What happened next shifted the balance of power completely. Instead of rushing into interviews or playing along with the usual off-season circus, John Harbaugh did the opposite. He slowed everything down. Reports started circulating that multiple teams reached out almost immediately after his availability became public. Some within minutes, others shortly after. The interest was overwhelming, and that's exactly why Harbaugh drew a line. Rather than entertain everyone, he made it clear he would only speak with a small group, 3 or 4 teams at most. That decision alone sent a message across the league. This wasn't a coach chasing opportunities. This was a coach filtering them. And in doing so, he forced franchises to reveal how serious they really were. For teams hopping to get a quick meeting just to stay relevant, the door quietly closed. Harbaugh wasn't interested in being part of a numbers game. He didn't need to hear the same pitch over and over. He's been around long enough to know when interest is real and when it's just noise. Limiting interviews meant every conversation had weight, and every team knew it. This is where Cleveland's approach suddenly mattered more than ever. When a coach narrows the field like this, timing and intent become everything. Teams that hesitated or tried to play it cool were left guessing. Teams that acted with purpose put themselves in the conversation. Harbaugh's selectiveness wasn't arrogance. It was clarity. What makes this even more telling is how comfortable he seems with the process. Taking time, evaluating fit, ignoring pressure. That level of patience only comes from confidence. He knows he doesn't need to rush. He knows the right situation will still be there when he's ready. And that confidence flips the usual off-season script. Front offices felt it immediately. Suddenly they weren't asking, "Can we get John Harbaugh?" They were asking, "Will he even talk to us?" That's a subtle but massive shift, because now teams have to show more than interest. They have to show alignment, vision, willingness to meet expectations that won't be negotiated lightly. This also exposed which franchises were prepared and which ones were scrambling. Harbaugh's approach acted like a spotlight. If a team didn't already have clarity about its structure, authority, and long-term plan, it became obvious fast. Those are the teams that didn't make the cut. For Cleveland, this moment is critical. Being considered at all signals that something about their pitch resonates. But consideration isn't a commitment. The Browns still have to prove they're not just another option, but the right one. And with so few spots available, there's no room for mixed messages. By shutting the door on most teams, Harbaugh made one thing clear. This process is on his terms. He's not chasing a job. He's choosing a situation. And only organizations ready to meet him at that level will even get a seat at the table. Once it became clear that John Harbaugh was being selective, the next layer of the story started to surface. And this is the part that made front offices pause. Because according to league insiders and reports circulating behind the scenes, Harbaugh isn't just looking for the right logo on the building. He's looking for control, real control, and his demands reflect that. The numbers alone turned heads. A salary in the range of $20 million a year, a massive budget dedicated to his assistant coaches. On the surface, that sounds aggressive, but for someone with Harbaugh's resume, it's not about flexing. It's about removing excuses. Elite assistants cost money, stability costs money, and Harbaugh doesn't want to walk into a situation where corners are being cut before the season even starts. But the real shift came with the reports about authority, total influence over the roster, a strong voice in personnel decisions, even the ability to choose the people he leans on when it comes to evaluating talent. That's where the tone changed, because now this wasn't just a coaching hire. It was an organizational reset. Some around the league raised eyebrows at that level of control. Others understood it immediately. Harbaugh isn't interested in being the face of decisions he didn't make. He's not going to answer for moves he didn't agree with. At this stage of his career, alignment matters more than titles, and alignment only happens when authority is clear. This is especially important when you factor in a young quarterback. Development doesn't survive mixed messaging. If the front office and coaching staff aren't on the same page, the quarterback pays the price. Harbaugh's demands suggest he understands that better than anyone. He wants the power to shape the roster around the vision, not react to it after the fact. What's being overlooked by some critics is that these demands aren't about ego. They're about accountability. When a coach asks for full control, he's also accepting full responsibility. Wins and losses fall on him. Development falls on him. There's no hiding behind committees or shared blame. That's a trade Harbaugh seems more than willing to make. For teams like Cleveland, this is where the decision gets uncomfortable. Saying yes means trusting one person with a level of influence the franchise hasn't always been comfortable giving. Saying no means risking the chance to land the very coach who could change the culture. It's not an easy choice, but it is a revealing one. These demands changed the entire landscape of the search. Teams that were casually interested backed off. Teams without clarity hesitated, and teams serious about real change leaned in. Harbaugh drew a line in the sand, and only organizations ready to cross it are still in the conversation. Even with the odds stacked and other franchises circling, Cleveland is still very much alive in this race. Not because they're the loudest, not because they're the flashiest, but because they might be the one team positioned to offer exactly what John Harbaugh is asking for if they're willing to fully commit. And that's the key part: willingness. On paper, Cleveland isn't the obvious choice. Bigger markets exist. Cleaner reputations exist. Teams with more recent success are in the mix. But Harbaugh isn't shopping for comfort. He's looking for impact. He's looking for a place where his presence actually changes the trajectory of the franchise. And few teams offer that opportunity more clearly than the Browns. Cleveland is at a breaking point in the best possible way. Another half measure won't work. Another compromised hire won't survive. The organization knows that. And when a franchise reaches that moment of clarity, it becomes dangerous in a good way. It becomes willing to do what it avoided before. That includes giving real authority to a leader who demands it. This is where Cleveland can separate itself. If they're prepared to align ownership, the front office, and the coaching staff under one clear vision, they can offer Harbaugh something rare: total trust. Not just resources, not just money, but the freedom to lead without interference. That matters more than market size or public perception. There's also the quarterback factor working in Cleveland's favor. The opportunity to shape a young quarterback's career from the ground up is something Harbaugh hasn't had in a while. If Shedeur is part of the plan, Cleveland becomes more than a rebuild. It becomes a long-term project with meaning, a chance to leave a lasting mark instead of stepping into a finished situation. Another advantage Cleveland holds is urgency. This isn't a team casually exploring options. They've already made a hard decision. They've already accepted the risk that comes with change. That sense of now can be appealing to a coach who doesn't want to wait around for internal debates to resolve themselves. Being ranked behind other teams doesn't disqualify Cleveland. In fact, it might help. Less noise, less pressure, more room to have honest conversations. Harbaugh isn't looking to win headlines. He's looking to build something that lasts. And sometimes the right situation isn't the one everyone expects. Cleveland still has to execute. Promises won't be enough. Vision has to be backed by action. But if the Browns are ready to match Harbaugh's demands with real commitment, they remain a serious contender. Because in a search defined by control, clarity, and long-term thinking, Cleveland might quietly check more boxes than people realize. When everything is stripped away, the rumors, the rankings, the speculation, this situation comes down to one uncomfortable question. Not who wants John Harbaugh. Everyone wants John Harbaugh. The real question is who he believes is ready. Ready to change how they operate. Ready to hand over real control. Ready to stop repeating the same patterns under a different name. Harbaugh isn't chasing validation. He's chasing alignment. At this stage of his career, he doesn't need another stop. He needs the right one. A place where leadership isn't second-guessed every week, where decisions aren't diluted by too many voices, where accountability runs in one clear direction. And that's why this choice matters more than any contract number or headline. For Cleveland, this moment is bigger than landing a high-profile coach. It's a referendum on the franchise itself. Are they finally ready to commit to a unified vision, or will fear of losing control hold them back again? Because this decision won't just determine the next season. It will shape the next era, and the league is watching closely. The quarterback element makes this even heavier. If Shedeur Sanders is part of Cleveland's future, then the environment around him has to be right from day one. No mixed messages, no power struggles, no instability disguised as flexibility. A young quarterback can't grow in uncertainty, and Harbaugh knows that better than most. This is why he's taking his time, why he's narrowing the field, why he's asking questions that make some organizations uncomfortable. He's not trying to win the offseason. He's trying to choose a situation that won't undermine him 6 months in. That patience is the loudest signal of all. Cleveland has done something it doesn't always do. They've put themselves in the conversation early and with purpose. Now comes the hard part, backing it up. Proving that this isn't just another moment of excitement before reality sets in. Because if they get this wrong, the consequences won't be short-term. They'll echo. So the real question isn't whether John Harbaugh could change the Browns. It's whether the Browns are willing to change for John Harbaugh. Whether they're prepared to trust one voice, commit to one direction, and finally stop second-guessing themselves. Because if they are, this hire could rewrite the story of the franchise. And if they're not, then this will be remembered as just another moment where opportunity knocked, and Cleveland hesitated.
If you enjoyed today's breakdown and want to keep up with all the drama, trades, and behind-the-scenes action in the NFL, then don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps this channel grow and lets us know you love this kind of content. And hey, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video with your friends, your group chats, or anyone who loves football as much as you do. The more the conversation spreads, the better it gets. Most importantly, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel and tap the notification bell. That way, you'll never miss when we drop fresh stories, wild rumors, or breaking updates that the mainstream media won't talk about.